So new podcast in the description. Spoke on Game 2 of the finals, and then Wes Anderson's new movie, Isle of Dogs. Now if we can get to Luka Doncic. For a lot of the time, it seems like he's been the consensus number 2 or even number 1 pick, depending on who you're talking to in this upcoming NBA draft. But lately, he's actually been dropping, and it seems that there's been news that the Phoenix Suns are probably going to select DeAndre Ayton. I mean, between ESPN and Bleacher Report and Sports Illustrated and Tankathon and NBADraft.net, all of these sites believe that Ayton's going number 1, and then after that, Doncic is going to be dropping a bit. And some even believe that he could drop out of the top 3, maybe even out of the top 4. He could go to the Mavericks at number 5. Like, what is this? What's going on here? Now, whether he actually falls that far or not, who really knows, but what would we do to explain this, right? A guy who was thought of as maybe being the number 1 guy falling now. Well, I think, number 1, there could still be a negative stereotype towards European players. I mean, I think enough guys have come over at this point and been really good to break that mold, but a small part of me believes that might still be there a little bit among the NBA. Number 2, I think we're dealing with the Sacramento Kings, who have just made a million dumb decisions over their time as a franchise. Now, to their credit, I do think that they at least did a good job of moving on from DeMarcus Cousins, and I mean, they do have themselves a not bad crop of talent right now between De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, Bogdanovic. I think Skal Labissiere and Willie Cauley-Stein have something to them. But at the same time, I don't think any of these guys are good enough to where you say to yourself, we don't need Luka Doncic, this 6'7", 6'8" dude who can be one of the best passers in the league the moment he shows up, right? And you assume that if he can just attempt some easier jump shots, because the majority of his shots this season have been off the dribble overseas, he also takes quite a lot of full court shots, which knocks down his three-point percentage. So you assume just in an NBA system where he can just like get some shots generated for him, some more catch and shoots at times, that his percentages can go up a bit. But I think another thing we could be dealing with here, and actually I want to mention this first, I do know the Suns hired his coach of a year ago, which that says a lot, if you ask me, that they would be willing to take on Doncic, but I have to believe that all of these mock draft sites know something that I don't know, when pretty much all of them, except for SB Nation, has Doncic falling out. So anyway, I do think another part of this could be Doncic's athleticism. It is kind of a thing how people have made it known that he's not the most blistering athlete, but I don't think I feel like he's like James Harden levels of athletic, right? Where, sure, he's not going to beat many people in a track meet, but he has the craftiness with the ball to where he can get by whoever he needs to get by, right? But perhaps NBA teams disagree with me on that one because, I mean, his weight is kind of up there. He's like 230 or 235 or something. So could it benefit him to perhaps lose 7 to 10 pounds or so? Yeah, I guess. As long as he can maintain some of that strength. But the other thing you got to look at, if you ask me, is like, given his age right now, 19, 20 years old or so, for him to already be this physically far along, in just in terms of like strength combined with his size and all that, that's a hell of a starting point, you know? And I feel like if you just gave him a year or two, he'd be able to get his weight and all that just in the perfect spot for NBA competition. Now, after doing some digging, I have found that he does like fast food a bit, which maybe that freaks NBA teams out a little bit, given his size already. I don't know. I mean, I don't think this is a Jahlil Okafor situation where the dude is clearly out of shape, Like, could he be in a little better shape? Sure, but I don't think he's some lost cause physically. But I just have to assume that these are the reasons why he could be falling out here. I do think maybe teams see him as a guy who can be very good, but not necessarily a top-tier talent, like a superstar player. I mean, for me, I look at his abilities in the pick and roll and his passing ability as being his real value, and then I think the jumper can be better just, again, with like being in NBA offenses and all that. So I think he can get to that point of being one of the, 15 best players in the league, maybe creep into the top 10, I don't know. But it seems NBA teams are not totally for that. Now, if the Suns were going to draft DeAndre Ayton number 1, I think that's cool. I think he's seemed to be the one dude who's the most sure thing outside of Doncic. Well, actually, I guess Jaren Jackson Jr. would probably be the most sure thing in this draft, but, sure thing in terms of star potential, I guess, with DeAndre Ayton. But after that, the Kings, again, I don't think their perimeter talent is anywhere near good enough to pass up on Doncic. And I think a similar thing can be said for the Hawks and the Grizzlies. I guess with Memphis, you could rationalize, well, they already got Mike Conley to take on a lot of ball handling duties, so maybe they would be better off with Bagley's star potential or whatever, but I think that's nitpicking a little too much. And the only reason I say this is because I have seen some places actually suggest that he could get to number 5 to the Mavericks, Doncic. It is a bit weird, man. I guess we can also talk about the fear of his defense. Here's the thing with that. Like, the only dude who is thought of to go in the top 4 by pretty much everybody who's actually good on defense is Jaren Jackson Jr. And having a bad defensive big man, and there's a fear that DeAndre Ayton and Marvin Bagley III will never figure it out on defense. That's always worse than having a bad defensive perimeter player. Because if Doncic sucks on defense, which, by the way, I think there's a decent chance that he could grow into just being an okay defender, just because of his size. Like, you look at Kyle Korver, right? Like, yeah, Korver sucks on defense now, but for the majority of his career, Korver really was not a bad defender, because he's a big dude who just knows how to play team defense. Like, yeah, he's not an athlete, but if you're 6'7", 220, half the work is done for you. And I think a similar thing could happen with Doncic. But also, you could just have him defend like the weakest of the perimeter players on the opposing team, right? You can't hide a center on defense. So, I've seen some people say, yeah, well, Doncic's defense isn't going to be good. DeAndre Ayton's defense is probably going to be worse than Doncic's is because he's a center. You can't hide a center. Now, with all that being said, it seems like Ayton's going to be a total behemoth at rebounding and post moves and finishing inside, and his jump shot seems to be a thing. So, I can still understand why you'd take him number 1, because he could very well average 25 and 12 one day. But after that, between Bagley just being an unknown, because he's an athlete who doesn't totally know how to play basketball, you got Jaren Jackson, who seems like a safe pick, but doesn't have the star potential, in before he ends up being the best player of this draft. But I don't know, it just seems like it'd be kind of weird for Doncic to drop all the way to like number 4 to the Grizzlies, which is what ESPN believes is going to happen right now. So, I don't know. I'm sure that these teams know some things and have had conversations with people that I have not, but it is still odd to see a guy who was kind of the consensus number 1 or 2 pick being shuffled around a bit now in mock drafts. So we'll just have to see what happens there. Once again, new podcast, Game 2 of the NBA Finals, and then Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs.